Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited to host this session. Traditionally, agents in Hollywood are the ones that stand behind the stars and are quiet in the background while the rock stars make the money. In India, the agents are the rock stars, and they are the ones that make the money. And in their case, they're providing a fabulous opportunity to students to explore new horizons. So, without further ado, I'd like to open the panel up to each of you to talk a little bit about your philosophy for engaging students in India and the region as a whole, South Asia. We've had a couple of days of very productive conversations with Foreign Affairs Ministry, with diplomats, ambassadors, members of Prime Minister Modi's policy team, as well as leading vice chancellors of Indian institutions, and we have here many of the world's most globally ambitious international institutions. Just to open up each of you, and Sushil, I'll start with you, just talk to me a little bit about your view on how Edwise is going about recruitment and what you're doing over time to change that experience for students.
Thank you, Adrian. I'd like to start off by saying I'm the dinosaur in the room. Been doing this for 31 and a half years, and when Ritika said facts, I said, yeah, that's how it all started. So we've had to obviously innovate, evolve, and where we are today. And we need to keep up with the new generation of expectations that students have today, the instant connectivity, the instant information, the quick turnaround times, reaching out to them at all hours. So we have been evolving all through, speeding up our teams, our software systems, etc. And we will continue to adapt and evolve to meet the demands that the student world has.
Thank you. Suneet?
Okay, hello. Okay, so evolution, as Sushil said, I think that's very essential. You know, if I look at it, generally the Gen Z per se, the model has been evolving over time. If I go back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, information was limited to what students could get, and it was dependent on what we were able to provide. It was a slow mail, applications need to be sent by post or by fax, wait for all of it. Difficult to understand where you could get enriched. So at that stage, our role would have been, was actually to help students identify where they qualify, help them understand where they should apply, because applying was expensive and a very long process. It changed, Google happened, Google got better. We moved from what you would call information, moved away from not having information to information overload. You search for one thing, you probably got 1,000 of those. Our role changed. We were more validators. We were in terms of students wanting to know, am I on the right direction? Now, as we, a little while back, I think Sonu said, we are now in a 5-second generation. And for 5-second generation, we've now got the generative AI, the ChatGPT, which will probably, you don't even need the information, just put the question, you get all the answers within 5 seconds. There is no information overload because it's giving you just one result. But then the question over here comes for us is, how we evolve is, what questions should they be asking? Because we don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. And I think that's the evolution we as an agency are saying is, our counselors need to be able to tell them, how do they go? Which is essential because if you look at it, almost 90% of the students who are looking at studying abroad, they're the first ones in the entire extended family going abroad. So they don't really understand what questions to ask outside the first 2 or 3 parameters, and that's where defining the right questions becomes extremely essential. So that's where I would say evolution,
Karunn, ApplyBoard has taken the world by storm, $4 billion plus valuation. Bought the sponsorship of most of the media out there, so poor little companies like us at the end here can't get any space in the news. Tell us about the ApplyBoard story and where you've come so far and a little bit about where you're heading.
Sure. First of all, I would like to congratulate Sannam and Acumen for putting together such a huge show. I think as an industry, a thought leadership like this, a convocation of people to come together and share ideas is missing. So congratulations on that, job well done. From the ApplyBoard standpoint, I think we have an advantage. And the advantage is this company is founded by 3 immigrant students from Middle East to Canada. So that puts everything in perspective of a student experience and agents and how do they operate. One other thing that we have realized is counselors and agents are here to stay. Students have a lot of confidence in them. So our goal is to enable them to do their job better. And when we think of enabling our counselors or agents, the things that comes to our mind is selection. Can we offer limitless selections to our students? Convenience. Can they do it quickly through one channel, one partner? So that's the second one. Third is basically accuracy. Accuracy is more and more picking up now with different kind of things that are coming up. So we want to make sure that whatever is done with the utmost accuracy. And finally, the speed. Like, to us, speed of course matters, but it's the 4th component in the whole system, because the journey itself is a 6-month long for a student to get into an international school. But these are the 4 founding pillars on which we try to innovate and try to leverage technology to stay ahead of the game.
Thank you. Banit?
So I guess like any business, the counseling business is evolving, which means the communication flow is no longer one way. It is like an ecosystem. It's like a social system which is evolving. So, for example, say a communication between a counselor about a course, university, etc., to a student gets evolved in the ecosystem, which includes things like Instagram, things like what their past students' experiences are, and the whole ecosystem to and fro of communication in formal, informal way is taking out. So as Imperial, we realize this fact in terms of just not like the whole, accuracy of information, all of that comes in with technology, but the way the evolution is happening, it is more like a social network rather than a single form of communication. So that's the evolution of counseling, where not only as counselors we would be able to give, but a lot of external factors which will help student make the end decision or get them to the right choice. So that's the way forward where I think in terms of this industry is heading.
I'd like to pick up on that point a little bit more. Our colleague Ritika Singh in an earlier session cited a statistic that it was Sonu, represents King's College London, talked about a statistic that said that Gen Z have an attention span of 5 seconds, which I think is now probably corresponds the attention span of a goldfish. So you're involved in creating dreams, fulfilling careers, mission to educate the world. You can't do that in 5 seconds. So how do you retain the attention enough of students to make the right decision? Because this is the only time they're going to make this decision once and only in their life. They're only going to do 1 undergrad degree, 1 postgrad degree. How do you keep that attention?
So it's about constant reinforcement. So the first reinforcement will come from our counselors, which give the primary information. The second reinforcement will come from some sort of university professor kind of interaction, which will talk to him about the course, the curriculum. The third interaction will come from some alumni who will talk to him about what aspects does the course have, what kind of job prospects do they have after the course. So that will be the third interaction coming in. Fourth could be any kind of social media, Instagram handles, Facebook, etc., which are showing lifestyle at that particular school, or lifestyle or academic orientation of that particular school itself. So that attention span is small, but it gets consistently reinforced. And then between the options does he have, and Gen Z has the most number of options available ever, right, in terms of where he wants to head or what he wants to do. So that attention, but constant reinforcement of these, effects will make him the right decision or the most appropriate decision in his career growth. So that reinforcement is what we do. We kind of have these activities, not only counselors, but alumni, professor sessions, and a lot of other, extended things which make a difference.
We've seen a tremendous rise in interest post-pandemic in overseas education from India and the wider South Asian region, and universities overseas are welcoming that with open arms, particularly because of a slowdown of interest from China. That accelerated interest is putting pressure on both the agents' channels and on the universities themselves. They're just struggling with the number of applications. Turnaround times are much slower. Quality of applications is regularly cited now as being at its lowest point for universities. Karunn, talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in ApplyBoard to address the process of a student application and how and where you see that still needs to be improved.
Thank you, Adrian. That's the question at our heart all the time, because we have a two-way responsibility. We are responsible towards our amazing partners, schools across the board, to make sure that we provide them the best quality students with the best quality education. So we are moving more and more towards like manual processing of applications to automating them by the ways of like OCRs, by the ways of instant validations of documents through various channels and stuff like that. And the result of which is, I'm very proud to say that our acceptance rate is 95%. Once an application gets submitted from an ApplyBoard portal, the chances a student would get a positive offer is 95%. Because we share that load from the school stand to us. We make sure that every application goes through the enabled hands of our experts, and then only it gets submitted. So within that process, starting from when an application is being built, providing the suggestions to the students to do it better, and to the RPs to do it better, from that point all the way till it gets submitted to a school, and giving schools the insights that this application probably stands at a level of 75th percentile of the students that you have accepted in the past is the magic that we are trying to create and see where we end up with it.
We're talking about efficiency of process and timing, Akshay, which is rather ironic. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
How are you?
Very well. Good to see you.
Good to see you, as ever. Good to see you. I'm sure you'll catch up very quickly. I'll come to you in a second. Suneet, quality is key to institutions, particularly the Acumen portfolio. They work with us to drive quality as well as volume, but also a lot of diversity. So you're juggling three very different factors there. How do you balance the three when you're managing student interest and that pipeline that you're passing to your university partners?
Okay, so how do you manage diversity? I think diversity, it's not a diversity in terms of students who are coming in. The concern comes in everybody wanting the same courses despite where they're starting off from. If you look at it, 10 years back, data analytics, data science courses started to come out. It did attract attention, but not so much. And then suddenly HBR called it the sexiest job of the 21st century. And then everybody and their uncle want to do data analytics, Today, if you look at it, I don't think it's a sexiest job of the century anymore, because it's, there are more people being churned out in those courses than it would. So what you need to do, when at our end, what we have to talk to the students is when they come in, we discuss where they're coming from, what are they actually seeking from it. Because, it's easy to fall prey for herd mentality. It's not herd mentality, it's actually validation. You find easy validation through it, and that's why you end up picking up the same courses. And at our end, if we have to build diversity, we really, really need to speak to them, understand why are they seeking what they are seeking. And invariably, you'll realize there are certain aspects where we take them to an alternative courses which would actually benefit them a lot more. But it's just about trying to awaken them up into asking those questions right, and that's always been there.
Sushil, you've been in the industry probably longer than most of us, and you were there in the early days where Ritika's fax machine was still relevant, and Students were looking forward to their communication, whirring through the living room. How has that person-to-person interaction changed? Do you still see the same type of interaction 30 years on, or is the interaction very, very different now, and how's it evolving?
Yeah, so the interaction now has evolved. Earlier, a student would probably visit us 2 or 3 times even before they decided to make an application. And maybe then the parents came and then the application would start. And between starting the first visit and the last visit, many years ago, it would be maybe 8 or 10 visits to our office, face-to-face. Today, I'm struggling to find out whether it's once, twice, or thrice. Okay, but they yet want to come to the office, but at what stage in the engagement life cycle is to be yet figured, because they might just want to inquire and maybe come when they want to apply. Sometimes they come to inquire, but they will not come when they apply. They just email everything back to you. And they might even just come at the visa stage, and sometimes they don't need help with the visa. So, but there is what we feel, because we are very much a B2C entity and been wanting to work in the model of face-to-face and, servicing the student end to end. We see students always will come. Even when we've had people from a city where we don't have an office, we've serviced them maybe for 3 months, 4 months, but they will visit some office along the channel and come and engage. So, but now less than before.
Akshay, we were talking about how the Basari brothers were real living case studies of their own business as immigrants who'd come out of the Middle East and studied in Canada. You wrote a very endearing post on LinkedIn earlier this week about your own journey and how you've come back to India and built a fabulous recruitment business from the ground up. I'm sure what you set out to do was very much a blank sheet of paper with a semblance of personal experiences thrown in. How's that journey evolved for you as the CEO of LeverageEdu, the founder and CEO, and how has it changed in the short time that you've grown your business to the scale that you've grown it?
First of all, Adrian, thank you so much for having me here and with a very distinguished panel, if I may so say the least. I think, one thing was very clear for me when we were starting up, that education is not the all end all. There has to be employment at the end of it, at least in the late 2010s or the early 2020s. It's very clear that nobody wants to kind of get a degree and put it on their wall. So it has to serve a purpose. A big reason that UK got to where it did in the last couple of years is because Brexit happened. A big reason US is seeing a resurgence is because there's certain policy change that we have had a chance to discuss over the last couple of months. So it's very clear that what you're really, of course there's this part about aspiration. The other part that you're kind of really selling on that you're really offering is a bright future for this person. And how do you do it in the most trustworthy way, if I may kind of say so. So I think that was always our focus from day zero. How do we build different tools that can establish a trust? How do we do things for without thinking about revenue from day one? So I think just luckily we were built in a way where we could do things for free for a certain period of time. Right or wrong is of course subject to scrutiny. But we built out multiple tools for the student. We built out what is the largest content factory for the student. We built out large communities where people could essentially have peer-to-peer interaction about their dreams, their aspirations. And this is a massively aspirational category, right? Like last night I was seeing this, I don't know how many in the audience, I was seeing this web series on Amazon Prime called Jubilee, which very interestingly is set in the 1940s and how cinema was coming up. And the main character, the guy who sets up a studio in India, he's come from Germany. So the guy who works with him, his biggest aspiration in his life is that I want my kid to study abroad. And I actually kind of took a screenshot of that. I was going to tweet about it. But the aspiration runs so deeply to go and study abroad, to essentially go and work abroad, and to really kind of drive into that consumer insight at a very deep level. I think So I was very, I think we're speaking about engagement cycles and how do you how many times people meet. I think over time people have developed trust in the space largely. They know that companies who have been there for a certain amount of time will not run as fly-by-night operators, take my money and kind of disappear the next day. So I think how do you as an industry, I don't think we are essentially competing with each other, right? We are essentially competing with all the folks who are in some sense fraudulent. There's this thing, I'll just spend 10 seconds on it. Some 268 students had to come back from Canada because they had forged their documents. So I think largely, as long as we're building a future which is more trustworthy, more student-friendly, more in line with giving the student as many free tools as possible to really decide what is right for them, I think we'll just keep going on the same line. For me specifically, we've been doing exactly that. Even today, we do about 200,000 counselings. A lot of times people come to us and say that, okay, you know what, but the conversion on that is very weak. But we want to continue doing that because we really want people to understand what is right for them. Hey kids, studying abroad is not right for you. Maybe there's this great manufacturing school somewhere in Ahmedabad or somewhere down south, and Tata is putting up this very massive factory with Apple again. Maybe this is the right destination for you. I want to do sports management. Hey, maybe this university in London or this university in Sydney is better for you. So I think it's very important to align and that's what we feel at least, align our incentives, align our thought process, align our product strategy, engagement strategy with the student. And as long as you continue doing that, this is a market that will keep on giving. Would love to share more, of course.
Yeah, no, great thoughts. And I want to build on that a little bit, and this is open to anyone that wants to step forward on the panel. You're right, this is a collective effort. We've all got a responsibility to do the right thing by what in Southern Asia is almost a quarter of the world's youth population under 25. There's a responsibility not just on fulfilling their dreams and providing them routes to great careers, but these are going to be the change makers of planet Earth over the next generation or two. So actually we carry a huge weight of responsibility on us. And if the machine breaks down through all of you, we have much bigger problems further down the line if those students don't get a quality education and don't get the opportunity to fulfill the job openings that many of the countries are recruiting them to fill, where they've got their own gaps of experience. You talk about partnership there. At the Sannam S4 group and at Acumen, we've made a very deliberate effort over the last 6 months to engage many of you and have more constructive conversations about how we work together. Most of you represent a good number of our Acumen University partners. Akshay, you were kind enough to host me in your offices a few months ago. We had a good round table, Suneet and Sushil and I, just before Christmas. I'm regularly on the phone to Mehdi. I always feel overdressed when I talk to him in his t-shirts, but he and I have regular conversations. We've got many of our partners here, university partners here. How do we work closer together as organizations to make the process more compliant, more streamlined, and more efficient so that we can expand what we're doing in a way that the sector embraces it in an even greater way than perhaps they currently are? Anyone want to offer any suggestions? Akshay.
Very quick comment, without too much gibberish. I think the core word in this business when it comes to universities is matchmaking. I think that's the only word which is important. A student who is unfortunately not able to do well in the academic setup, and not just in India, when I say India, I mean other emerging countries, be it large parts of Africa, large parts of Southeast Asia as well. A kid who's not able to do well in that academic setup does not really mean that he or she is not a bright kid. That kid who's getting 55% marks in their Indian academic setup, they also need to be matched to the right school. The kid at 65% needs to be matched to the right school. The kid at 75% also needs to be matched to the right school. Similarly, universities, the only way they'll be able to hack their game and become better and better in terms of rankings, in terms of how they project themselves, in terms of maybe even improving their fee structures, is when more students at their end are successful. And I think the right way to do it is, how do I ensure that I say, and I'm saying something that might hurt my business, but how do I say no to the person who's not relevant to me than giving an offer to everybody? And for the student also to ensure that rather than applying to 10 different schools, how do I apply to those 3 or 4 schools which are going to be relevant to me, which lead into some employment outcome, which lead into something that if I'm looking to do sports, why should I go and do agriculture in Canada? And so there has to be a lot of positive intent from both the sides. And if matchmaking essentially goes off well, we won't have any of the problems that universities face about bad conversion percentages, or the student really coming and back and saying that, hey, you know what, my experience wasn't great, and maybe I blame XYZ and ABC for that bad experience. So I think as the better we can do with matchmaking in terms of our processes, our products, I think that will just add up and ensure that we do collectively better as an industry.
I'd just like to add to that. The unfortunate thing is that matchmaking, the decision is not taken by the student. We have peers, we have parents, and budgets, and everything comes in. And unfortunately, the match sometimes is more about ROI than what earlier in the afternoon Ganesh Kohli said about purpose. There's a big difference between the two, but sometimes ROI wins over purpose.
Karunn.
I think there is a large opportunity for us to collaborate to compete. We are so stuck up in competition amongst each other that we seldom collaborate. And what I mean by that is there could be a lot more information sharing across the board to share out, like Akshay said, non-performing agents or those who are trying to trick the system and stuff like that. And at the same time, I think there is an opportunity for all of us to adapt change a lot better. And that starts from schools and then us as well.
Suneet.
Okay, in terms of cooperation, I have a very different view to it. I think I would look at cooperation a little further, because I think the journey we're going to cover with the student is going to increase. And two, I think the matchmaking, as Sushil said, it's much more complicated than just simply doing it in percentages. If I look at percentages, we get to the same, 65% so-and-so universities get in. But if we could get access, understanding from university partners where our students have gone in, to understand which university students have done which, how have they done in those courses, what is the completion rate, how successful they are, what will help us understand is when we are directing students to understand, look, this is the area where you should be looking at, these are universities you will succeed at. Currently, there is no metric available for us to judge that. So, whatever metric is very generic, and it's not specific to our students. And as we go along and as we talk about AI and we talk about a lot of those things, I think this data would be very good, very important for us to properly advise students on the courses they should be going and based on how the further future success comes out,
Yeah, one of our colleagues, Hemant Das, who represents the University of Virginia's Darden Business School, cited an article that was in Bloomberg a couple of days ago about how students are complaining that the degrees are not equipping them for their employment journey, and companies are also complaining that graduates are not job ready. There's a mismatch there somewhere that needs to be sorted out, because it's not in the interests of society for universities to be trying their hardest and to be failing to fulfill the students' needs, and for corporates to be complaining at the other end. And many of our discussions were around that yesterday. We had Sanjeev Sanyal as a keynote yesterday. He's Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council member. A out-of-the-box thinker, quite controversial at times, and quite controversial right here. And he essentially said that all of our university partners' campuses were about to die. So that was his opening remarks, so you could have caught everyone's attention quite quickly. But the premise of his conversation was, how do we think differently to educate a much larger population across India, provide access and affordability to a much larger population. He wasn't talking about the 1s and 2s and 3% of India that can afford to go overseas and have a 3 or 4 year campus experience. How are you seeing the interest for online education or hybrid education? We've also been talking about transnational education partnerships, 2+2, 3+1. In China, the agents there will be selling 1+1s, 3+1s all day long, but it's not something that you guys have been doing historically. Are you seeing a change in interest from students, or is it still just traditional, get me to a campus for a 3 or 4 year or 1 or 2 year UG/PG experience?
I guess where a lot of these articulation agreements get stuck up is who gets the cheese, right? Somewhere there is a strong disconnect between the Indian education institutes and the represented universities abroad. And many a times I've spoken to a lot of vice chancellors, they come like informally, if you want my students is not what I'm looking at. I'm actually looking at collaborations in terms of research, or private universities are setting up these kind of incubation cells. And it's like, has to be a win-win. So where I have tried on many occasions to make match, like between universities to make the matchmaking work, only if both are heavily collaborative in nature, which means there's a give and take model. It is not, I mean, there is obviously a commercial sense to it, but there has to be a strong give and take in terms of research, in terms of student experiences. And another inhibition which I think is the visas. When a student is looking at, because visa is not in anybody's hand, neither in my hand, neither in the, either institution's hand. So when this articulation agreements happen, and if after 1 year the visa is not going through or there are issues, is the inhibition which parents have. So for them to get into these kind of courses, it's, I mean, one is at the making of this course, and the second is at selling or, however, apprising the student of this course, that what makes sense. And the challenges I think they are facing.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of misunderstanding just within the sector about, particularly in India, about what some of these joint programs mean, the value of the degree, what's the catch. So we're all going on that journey, and for the consular offices, they're getting their orders from higher office back at HQ in London or Washington DC or Ottawa, and so some of this stuff is quite slow to filter down. So one of the earlier sessions today, we had a number of universities talking about T&E and the models that they're looking at here in India, and everyone had a different view about what that model looked like. So I was sitting in the audience thinking, wow, if you've all got 6 different versions of what this recipe looks like, how on earth are the students going to recognize which model is kosher, which is the best? I mean, it's tricky enough making a decision for higher ed, but let alone when all of these complexities come in.
Absolutely. So, like, I can give you a personal anecdote here. My daughter was visiting. She's in first year. And during a conversation, she said, the current education system seems scam to me. Like, we are paying for 15, 17, 18 years of education, and we don't even know if the skills that we are learning are going to be relevant. Am I going to get the job out at the end of the day? I don't really care about the degree. So I think change is inevitable. And in that sense, we have to put the student first. Like, what is it that the learner is looking for? Is it the short-term program, more job-oriented? Those are the kind of factors that I think we as an industry has to think through and start putting together.
Akshay?
2 very quick points, because incidentally, I was at a place where I was meeting an owner of a large university in India, and he was discussing exactly this. This is what he wants to do. I think 2 and these are very personal. Let me try and play Sanjeev, given he's not here today, and make up for his absence. But first one, most of the stuff that is discussed around this is absolute PR and gibberish. There is very little heel that meets the ground, and there's very little execution around it. So it's not been done in the right way. That's one. Second, we have to realize that market probably will exist for us slightly few years down. If at least, like, we have done multiple studies on the student base that we have, and a large part of and we spoke about China as well. The typical student who was going out from China was somebody who wanted to essentially, and with due respect to our neighbor China, they were students who essentially won't mingle so much with each other on the campuses. They largely wanted to finish their studies. They were left behind with the Chinese education system. They wanted to come back and do great things within the country. The typical student who's going out from India is somebody who's actually looking to work there for a couple of years. They're doing those part-time jobs. You won't really find a lot of Chinese students in part-time jobs as compared to brown people, right? So I think the markets are very different, and we are still a few years away from, at least that's my view, pathways or transnational becoming a big hit. And for that, a lot of awareness in the industry will have to happen for a very consistent period of time without any PR and gibberish, which is the path that we might have taken right on the last couple of years.
Yeah, we discussed that with some of our institutional partners today, and there's always the benefit of first mover advantage, but if you trip over as a first mover, there's also a big downside to it as well. So yeah, you're right. Finding the timing for this is very much what's been discussed. Sushil.
So 2+2, I mean, I've always wondered why it's not taken off in India like it has in many parts of the world. And one of the thoughts that I had is that it serves a price, I mean, a capacity issue and maybe a quality issue, but it doesn't necessarily solve the price issue. And if you manage to do it at the right price, it could possibly work out, because there's something more important, that students go abroad not only to study, they go for careers, immigration, experience. Many of them are leaving their house for the first time. They're actually getting out because they need to get out. Okay, and they will do it. Another thing that you need to understand here is that an Indian student always will do a master's. They do not stop at a bachelor's. So if you're spending that much at a bachelor's, you have that much less left at the master's. So the pricing has to keep in mind that the student either gets enough employment to pay for the master's when they go abroad, or somehow there's money left over for the master's program. Yeah.
Gentlemen, we could talk for hours. You're all doing great work, innovating, making students pathways to a better future, an opportunity, and we appreciate your partnership at Acumen, and I know that our university partners who work with you appreciate the work you're doing. We all recognise we've still got so much more to do. That's what gets us out of bed every day and keeps us persevering, and we want to aim at being the best at what we do. And I'd like to thank you all for giving up your time, and very much appreciate you joining the Acumen Global Gateway Summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you.